On a foggy autumn morning, one man held the stronger army and the better ground, and still lost everything. He was no warrior, but a loyal minister who fought to protect his dead lord's little son. His enemies were many, and even his own allies waited on the hills, ready to betray him. In a single morning, the fate of all Japan would be decided in a narrow, misty valley. By noon, his great army was shattered, and he was a fugitive hunted through the mountains. This is the story of the losing side. To understand how the man with every advantage was ruined, we must go back to a dying warlord. His name was Mitsunari, and he served the great lord who had at last united all of Japan. That lord was Hideyoshi, a peasant who rose to rule the whole country by sword and cunning. Mitsunari was no great general. He was a brilliant administrator, master of taxes, supply, and law. When Hideyoshi died, he left only a little boy of 5 as heir to his vast power. To guard the child, he named 5 great lords as regents, sworn to keep the peace. But the mightiest of them, the old Lord Ieyasu, was patient, cunning, and hungry for the whole realm. Mitsunari swore to defend the boy's rights, though few men loved the cold and haughty minister. Ieyasu broke the dead lord's laws, made secret marriage alliances, and gathered power to himself. The proud warriors who had won Hideyoshi's wars despised Mitsunari and drifted toward the old lord. Mitsunari saw the realm slipping into one man's hands and resolved to stop him or die. So Japan split in two, the eastern army under Ieyasu and the western army raised in the child's name. Ieyasu marched north against another lord, leaving the capital behind him like open bait. The moment he was gone, Mitsunari raised his banners in revolt, and the Great War began. Ieyasu turned his army around and came racing back down the Great Road toward the heart of Japan. The two hosts, each some 80,000 strong, converged on a misty valley called Sekigahara. There Mitsunari chose his ground with care, and it was ground that should have won the battle. He set his armies on the hills wrapped around the valley where the eastern army would have to march. It was a perfect trap, a closing jaw, with the enemy caught in the low ground between. On paper, his army was as strong, held the heights, and could crush the foe from 3 sides. But Mitsunari's greatest weakness was not the enemy in front. It was the friends at his side. Many of his lords had secretly written to Ieyasu, promising to turn traitor when the moment came. Chief among them was Kobayakawa, a young lord with 15,000 men on a mountain above the field. On the morning of the battle, a thick autumn fog lay over the valley, blinding both armies. Men could not see the enemy a few paces off, and waited in the cold and the damp. When at last the fog lifted, the two great armies crashed together in the narrow ground. For hours, the western troops fought hard, and in places they drove the eastern lines back. On the right, a loyal and dying lord, blind and sick, held his post with grim courage. But the trap would only close if every lord attacked. And now, the hidden rot began to show. Great contingents on the hills sat still, feasting and watching, refusing every order to advance. Mitsunari lit signal fires again and again, begging the young lord to charge down from his mountain. But that lord sat frozen with fear, unable to choose which side he would betray. The whole battle now hung upon one man's nerve, and that man could not make up his mind. Below him, Mitsunari's soldiers bled and died, waiting for help that would never come. If the fall of the faithful moves you, take 1 second to subscribe and stand with the losing side. Ieyasu, out of patience, ordered his gunners to fire straight at the waverer's own position on the hill. The message was brutal and clear. Choose now, or be treated as an enemy. In terror. The young lord made his choice and led his 15,000 men down the slope. But he did not fall upon the enemy. He charged into the flank of his own ally. The blind lord had feared this treachery, and for a time his men threw the traitors back. Then 4 more lords on the hills turned their colors and joined the betrayal all at once. The loyal wing was swallowed from every side, and the dying blind lord took his own life. With that, the whole right of the Western army collapsed into ruin. The jaws that Mitsunari had built to trap the enemy now closed upon his own men. The hunters became the hunted, cut apart by the very allies who had sworn to fight beside them. Mitsunari's center was surrounded, his banners falling, his brave soldiers overwhelmed by numbers. In a single hour, the battle that should have been won was hopelessly, utterly lost. The victory built on careful planning was undone by treachery in one terrible morning. Mitsunari watched his life's cause dissolve and knew the child he had sworn to protect was doomed. As the Western army broke, one fierce clan cut straight through the enemy center to escape. But for Mitsunari, there was no army left. Only the mountains and a desperate fight for his life. The minister who had commanded 80,000 men now fled alone through the hills, sick and starving. For days he hid in caves and villages, his fine robes ragged, his proud face gaunt with hunger. He might have died quietly in the wilderness, or fallen on his own sword like a warrior. But Mitsunari chose to live, still hoping against hope to raise the cause once more. At last a village he had once helped gave him shelter, then gave him up to the enemy. He was seized, bound and dragged before the triumphant old lord, a beaten and broken man. Even in defeat he would not grovel, and met his captors with cold and stubborn pride. The great warlord had won, and the loyal minister had nothing left but the manner of his death. Mitsunari was paraded through the streets of the capital for the crowds to jeer and to mock. It is said that on the way thirsty, he asked for water and was offered a dried persimmon. He refused it, saying such fruit was bad for the health, and men laughed at a doomed man's care. But he answered that a true man guards his body until his cause is wholly lost, and his was not. Then he was taken to the execution ground and beheaded, proud and unbroken to the very end. Sekigahara was over, and with it died the last hope of the house that he had served. The battle that lasted a single morning had decided the fate of Japan for centuries to come. 3 years later, the old lord took the ancient title of shogun and founded a dynasty of iron. His house would rule Japan in peace for over 250 years. The country was sealed off from the world, and the age of the warring lords was ended forever. But the little boy that Mitsunari had died to protect was not spared for long. Years on, the old lord destroyed the child's great castle at Osaka, and his line was wiped out. Everything the loyal minister had fought and died for was erased from the earth. Mitsunari was never a beloved man, and history long remembered him as the proud, cold loser of Sekigahara. He was no brilliant soldier, and his sharp tongue made enemies of the men he most needed. Yet of all the lords that day, he alone never wavered in his loyalty to his dead master. The young traitor did not enjoy his reward and died within 2 years, some say mad with guilt. The lords who kept faith lost everything. The lords who broke faith inherited the world. Mitsunari held the stronger ground and the larger army, and lost to the daggers hidden among his friends. He learned too late that the finest plan means nothing when the men behind you long for your fall. He asked proud warriors to follow a minister they despised, and in their hearts they had already left. The man with every advantage gambled all on the loyalty of others, and that loyalty was never there. And so, in the fog of Sekigahara, the better ground and the just cause found the grave of the losing side. He was faithful to the end, in a world that rewarded only the men who betrayed. This has been the story of the losing side,